What's up YouTube, this is Devi, aka Deviant Dreamers, and I'm back with yet another video talking about Gwent in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Today we'll be starting a new series where I'll be detailing all of the information and strategies surrounding the different factions in this game. We'll be looking specifically at each faction's abilities, their leader cards, their specialties, and their weaknesses as well. Additionally, we'll be talking about some strategies that you can use in order to help you win against these factions and with these factions. And if you'd ever like to see these Gwent tips and tricks live in practice, feel free to check us out on twitch.tv/deviantdreamers. We stream Sunday, Wednesdays, and Saturday with Gwent Online and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. So without further ado, let's take a deep dive into our very first faction that we'll be looking at today, which is the Northern Realms. When you first pick up the Gwent mantle in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, you're given a deck in the very beginning of the game, and this deck is in fact from the Northern Realms faction. One of the things that makes the Northern Realms so strong in The Witcher 3 is their faction ability. The player gets to draw an additional card if they win the previous round. In the game of Gwent, having a card advantage against your opponent is incredibly powerful. With a card advantage, you'll be able to bounce back if anything unexpected happens in the game, and more than likely, you'll have more wiggle room to counter your opponent's strategies. To put it simply, a card advantage means a point advantage. As with each faction in Gwent in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, the Northern Realms has 5 distinct leader abilities. These full test cards have the ability to double your siege unit strength, summon an impenetrable fog card from your deck, clear all weather effects, destroy your enemy's highest powered units in the ranged row if they are equal or greater than 10 points, and similarly, destroy the most powerful siege units that your enemy plays if that row equals to 10 or more points. Now, based simply on these leader abilities, I would consider the Northern Realms faction to be particularly strong against the Scoia'tael faction and the Skellige faction. And my reasoning behind this is as follows. Scoia'tael factions tend to play a lot of ranged cards. With the ability to pull an impenetrable fog card and play it instantaneously from your deck at any point in time, this could be a strong maneuver against Scoia'tael, so long as they do not have any clear weather cards. Similarly, considering a counter from the Skellige faction, if anyone were to play a Skellige Storm, for example, the ability to clear the weather at any given time from a full test leader card would be particularly strong as well. Now let's talk a little bit about the composition of the Northern Realms faction. A few of the elements of this faction that makes it particularly strong are as follows. A lot of tight bond units, high power siege cards, and the prevalence of spies. Now, tight bond units are those units when played next to each other that double in strength. So for example, if you were to place 2 4-point Blue Stripes Commando units next to each other, they now become 2 8-point Blue Stripes Commando units. And of course, the more that you add, the higher the power value becomes. Now, Blue Stripes Commandos are actually cards that you do receive in the beginning of the game, so if you're able to get your hands on all 3 of them, the potential for power is incredible. The only thing to keep in mind with tight bond units in particular, especially in the Northern Realms faction, of course, is not to try and play them successively one after another. That way, your opponent hopefully won't be able to scorch such a large amount of power and a large amount of cards at one time. Now, the Northern Realms is also known for some of the higher power siege units in Gwent as well. And these catapults and things of that nature can be bolstered with either a full test leader ability or a commander's horn. Now, while you could use a commander's horn on those tight bond cards that we talked about just now, I personally would suggest dividing your power as much as possible in different rows, such as keeping your tight bond units for close combat, your commander's horn potential for siege row, so that your enemy does not have a massive advantage were they to play something like Biting Frost and you have no counter to that. When in doubt, divide and conquer. And And lastly, as mentioned previously, the Northern Realms is also particularly powerful because of the sheer amount of spy cards in this faction. Now, when I play Gwent, I tend to use all of my spy cards in the very beginning of the game in round 1. That way I can quickly gain a card advantage, and I can put myself in a very good position moving into the other rounds. Sometimes, if you're playing against another Northern Realms faction or Nilfgaard, your opponents might try to steal those spy cards with decoys and kind of volley them back and forth with you. Now, the one thing again that does make Northern Realms particularly strong is that because of the faction ability, you can also get an additional card advantage going into round 2. So don't worry if you are at a card disadvantage in the end of round 1, so long as you secure that victory, that should help you moving forward into round 2. Now that we've talked about some strategies to use when playing with the Northern Realms faction, let's talk about the opposite, what you can use to combat against Northern Realms. As I just mentioned, Northern Realms tends to use a lot of spy cards. So if you can craft a deck where you are also utilizing a lot of spy cards, or you're using as many decoy cards as possible, this might be able to help volley against that card advantage that the Northern Realms typically will gain on you. This is particularly true if you're playing a faction other than the Northern Realms or Nilfgaard that doesn't have a lot of spies in their deck. Make sure that you have a lot of decoys to try and play those spy cards right back at your opponent. To try and counter those tight bond cards, you want to use your weather cards and scorch cards whenever possible. As for weather cards, try to use them at the very end of a round. That way, hopefully your opponent will have played their clear weather card right before you end up bringing the weather down. As for scorch cards, timing is definitely of the essence. If you can get your opponent to play a few of their tight bond cards, and you still haven't played any cards with a value higher than those units, that is the perfect time to scorch out multiple cards at once and hopefully turn the tide around. While I believe that the two strongest factions to combat the Northern Realms are, ironically, the Northern Realms and the Nilfgaardian faction, ample use of decoy cards, scorch cards, and also weather cards should ensure a victory from the other factions as well. And that's it on the Northern Realms. If you have any other tips or tricks that you use when playing with or against the Northern Realms faction in Gwent, feel free to post them below. We would absolutely love to hear from you. Next time, we'll be taking a deeper dive into looking at the Nilfgaardian faction. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon!